I'm Les for That's My Entertainment, and I'm of course here with Kandice Martellaro, uh, whose name I tried to not mess up before this interview and then immediately stumbled through it.
You did good.
Thanks. So of course, you wrote the prom episode on Stand Against Evil, if I remember correctly.
Yes, Vampire Creek. Yes.
Yes, which was, the whole show's great. That's one of the absolute standout episodes, I feel. Of course, you're also in Femmebot PhD, which is hilarious. Folks can go watch the pilot over on YouTube, and I would very much recommend doing that. A lot of people don't know about the Dracula fish, and it's dangerous out there. But of course, you're also involved with Hanging with Dr. Z. I'm thrilled to get to talk to you about all of it. But when it comes to, I'd heard you in an interview once say that you preferred or found that you preferred television writing or television comedy to feature film comedy at some point in kind of learning this craft. Do you feel like that's still true, or is there a reason that kind of one structures struck you better?
I originally set out to write and direct movies, and along the way, I discovered I do better with television. And I think it's because I like the idea of being able to tell something in a longer, more serialized format.
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, I kind of like, and there's also like, I like kind of one of two things, either being able to tell something in a long serial version or episodic, like just short stories kind of thing. But that's not to say like I don't want to write and direct movies. I'm still aiming to do that as well.
I
But
I
yeah.
do find when I'm watching shows that the rise of binge watching has not just changed obviously how much time I spend on the couch, but what I kind of look for in stories now. There's almost a mode shift. I spend like a few months of the year where I just seem to only watch movies, and then I'll kind of switch over to like, no, I don't want this to wrap up in an hour and a half. I'd kind of like you to just put a pin in it at 48 minutes, and then let's continue this for the rest of the week. Uh,
Mhm.
when it comes to moving between features and television and things for Fembot PhD, or writing for a show that needs to be in a collective voice like Stand Against Evil. Um, do you find that when you're writing down your joke ideas that you kind of put them into buckets of like, that is a sketch. I don't think I need to figure out how to do that 48 minutes long. Uh, or hey, that seems like a sitcom episode, or my God, that would be perfect for Dana.
um, Gosh, it's ever hard to find things that are perfect for Dana. Um, but no, I mean, yeah, I think so. I also do a little bit of stand up, and the biggest thing I see in kind of regards of what you're saying there is when it comes to specific jokes, of thinking this is something I could step out into a full sketch versus this is just a stand up joke. Like, that's good to just tell a setup and punchline and let that be that, versus I could step this out into a full 3 minute sketch. I think that's the biggest place where I see the difference.
Mm.
Usually for like television ideas or movie ideas or something, it's usually a longer, more broad concept and not just like this is a funny joke or a funny bit or whatever. Um, that kind of concept, I end up usually doing more stand up or sketch type of thing.
One of the things that I've always been told to do, and that I've found a lot of value of in trying to improve my own writing, or is reading other scripts, not just for the formatting of that particular weirdness, but because a lot of software will take care of that for people, but for knowing how much description of characters does William Goldman give, or how do sitcom jokes really look on a page? Because we've all tried to write down something funny and gone, well, that's dead now. Uh, when you were first learning to kind of translate your own humor into something that you could hand to someone else and say, now you tell the joke, uh, what do you feel like was one of the first things that you really picked up from looking at scripts and going, oh, I should do that?
Probably just structure, like that alone. When I first moved to LA, one of the big things I used to do, I couldn't afford to take like a pilot writing class. Um, so I'd just go to, we have the Writers Guild Foundation
Mhm.
library here in LA, and I would just go there. It literally would be like I'd get off work at 5, the library would close at 6, and I would get there at like 5:15 and just cram as much coverage as I could in that amount of time. And I'd go like every Thursday or whatever, and that was kind of my thing of how I self-taught. So I'd say like the biggest thing I think I've picked up on scripts is formatting. Also, a big thing that stood out. I love doing coverage of shows I'd already seen, and seeing how different, like how many jokes work on the page
Mhm.
versus what you end up seeing on screen. There were scripts I'd read where I'd read a joke, specifically like Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one that comes to mind quickly, where there would be jokes in the scripts that are hilarious, but the ones in the show are completely different, and they're also hilarious. But I could tell even just reading it of like this is something that reads funny on the page. Where I bet when they went to shoot it, it didn't read the same way, and I bet they probably had a writer on set that quickly scrambled and came up with a different thing, or the
Mhm.
actors improvised. Um, but it was interesting to me to see like the way sometimes you have to just write jokes that work on the page, and even if they don't quite translate, they work out, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
So I think structure and like just seeing what works on the page versus what ends up being shot are two different things, and that was beneficial to learn.
When it came to working on Stand Against Evil, if I remember correctly, is that was one of your first someone else produced it uh, for another property work. What was it like taking that all the way through to seeing it on screen? Beyond just writing a spec script for a show or writing a script that you want to get produced, and then you've got to spend a couple of years on Kickstarter, which we'll talk about in a moment. Um, what was it like getting? Was there a loss of control moment that freaked you out, or was there? Did it just feel like this amazing shepherding your baby to screen? How did that go down?
That the whole thing is still so surreal to me, and it's still something I like can't believe even happened. It's I always tell people like I got it so good with my first ever writing credit, and I'll probably never have it quite that good ever again. um, it really was Dana for let me back up and explain. I had been working as Dana's assistant on the show for a year, and we're talking about Dana Gould, to be clear.
Hmm.
um, uh, I'd been
Yeah,
working
church
as
lady.
Dana.
Everybody knows him.
Truly. Yeah. Famous from SNL. Um, but I had been working as his assistant for a year. I worked as an assistant on season 2 of Stand Against Evil. And then we were in the summer in between while the show was on hiatus, prepping for season 3. And I'm an avid fan of the movie Coraline. It's my all time favorite movie, and Dana knows that. And so he texted me and he goes, "Hey, I've been thinking maybe we could do a Coraline type story for Stan." And I was like, "That'd be so cool." And he's like, "Yeah, maybe think of some story ideas." And that was kind of his way of hinting at like, I'm going to try to fight for you to have an episode of the show. Um, and so from there, like that was the beginning. And then we came in with pitches, and just from beginning to end, it's insane to me that it was weird to see, like, it was the first time that I wrote something and was able to see it shot by a professional crew, and things I thought, like, Dana told me, he's like, you can put whatever you want on the page. If it's something that we can't afford in the budget or something, they'll back us down, but like put what you want. And they never did back me down. So like the prom scene specifically, I had such a specific thing in my head,
Hmm.
and then walking into the set the day that we were going to shoot, and it's exactly what I pictured, like to a T. Which I have to thank Molly Coffey, our
Hmm.
art director and our production designer, and it was just surreal. And I had so much say involved in everything. Dana let me communicate directly with the art department, which this is not normal for a baby writer, to be clear. Um, I
Yeah,
got to,
that
yeah.
sounds like a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, um, he let me tell wardrobe what the wardrobe should look like. I got to communicate directly with the art department. Um, I had very much creative control over the way the episode looked, and that's not typical. So yeah, to have what I put on the page in my head translated exactly how I saw it was very,
Mhm.
very surreal.
I'm finding more and more as I talk to people. There's tons of showrunners in the industry, which is a term that I think most of us on this side of the screen just learned a few years ago. Uh,
Mhm.
but the ones whose names I keep hearing, it's like a coaching tree of amazing bosses who trained amazing bosses of it's nice and reassuring even in Hollywood to hear that like decency and being a good boss is still something that is valued and appreciated, and that you can do good things for other people, because
Yeah.
that's a really great experience. I feel like so often we just expect this disheartening, like, oh yeah, no, I turned my script in and then like this other thing was on screen 8 months later, and I don't know. uh, and so yeah, that's just wonderful to hear. In terms of Dana then putting on the monkey suit, um,
For Dr. Z.
let's talk a little bit about Hanging with Dr. Z. It
Yeah.
is for folks that should go and check out season 1 right now. It's great. They are short interviews with Dana Gould in a completely movie accurate, as far as I can tell, Dr. Z suit, or Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes, interviewing folks. I still think my favorite episode is him interviewing Dana Gould, uh,
Yeah.
which is where the previous Carvey joke comes from. I'm sure that's not the
Yes.
first time in his life he's had that joke happen. Um, in terms of the idea and getting involved with it and how it kind of flowed out of after Stan, uh, can you talk a little bit about uh, what you do for the show and how it developed?
Yeah. So I'm a producer on Hanging with Dr. Z. Basically, what happened was Dana, for years, he's been starting way, way back to when he was a kid. Planet of the Apes is his favorite movie of all time. And anyone that knows him or anyone that's like even remotely a fan of him kind of knows that.
Hmm.
And it's to the point where, like, when other people make documentaries about Planet of the Apes, he's like the guy they call for information. Like, that's how much of a nerd he is
Hmm.
about that. And so he started somewhere along the way. He and makeup artist Andy Schoenberg, who's amazing, um, started doing these appearances as Dr. Zaius. And I mean, it would even be like a Turner Classic Movies has had him on multiple times as Dr. Zaius. Not last year, because that would have been 2020, but a few years ago.
So
Um,
the lost year, yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's the gas leak year of
It's
life.
exactly, it's the gas leak year.
Yeah. I'm glad you caught my
Yeah,
reference.
that's exactly what was going through my head. And it was like, that's nobody else watches it.
No, no, it's totally 2020 was our real life gas leak year.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, but yeah, I think it was 2019. There was a panel with a bunch of the original cast from Planet of the Apes, and they brought Dana out as Dr. Zaius, like, as a surprise. They didn't tell the cast, and so suddenly Dr. Zaius was, and he was like nervous about doing it. But anyway, so this became a reoccurring thing, and he started doing appearances in comedy shows. Like, I remember seeing him at the Satellite myself, as Dr. Zaius in like this big Christmas special thing here in LA. And so this became a reoccurring thing that he dresses up. He's been on Kimmel doing it. Um, and so in the middle of the pandemic, just Dana and other friends feeling antsy and wanting to do something creative, locked up in our homes and stuff, just started thinking, like, what can we do that would be COVID safe, that could be interesting? And he was like, what if we did Dr. Zaius, but like as a talk show, and if we set it up in this very Space Ghost, coast to coast kind of atmosphere where I don't have to come into contact with the
Hmm.
guests, that might work. And so they found a way to do it, a COVID compliant stage. It was actually pretty cool. They had guests, when we reached out to guests to be on the show, they had two options. They could either come to our studio, where we had an entirely separate room set up for them, where everything was pre-lit. All they had to come in is put their lav on and sit down, and everything was set, and they talked to Dana on a screen.
Hmm.
And that was all preset for them, but they didn't have to come into contact with anybody. Or they had the option, we could send a kit to their homes and they could do it virtually. So we shot it that way, and we just put it up on YouTube just as a creative project, and it got very well received. And a lot of fans started asking for, like, are you going to do a season 2? Are you going to do a season 2? And the thing is, Dana and his friends had all just paid for that out of pocket. And I think because it's in all the Kickstarter stuff, I can openly say it cost them about $40,000 to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's, I would say that's the number that I think you put up on the new
Yeah.
Kickstarter, and then Dana was going halvesies.
Yes. So we went into it and it was like, well, we'd like to do a season two, but we can't keep just paying 40,000 every time we do it.
Yeah.
So we talked about doing a Kickstarter. I had done a Kickstarter years ago for a short film I did, and I was like, I might know how to help here. So me and Denny Tedesco, who has also done a successful
Hmm.
Kickstarter campaign for a movie called The Wrecking Crew, worked together with Dana and Rob Cohen and Pete Aronson, and we put together this Kickstarter campaign, and it has. We only asked for a half. It was like, if we can just get 20,000 towards this, great. And it's the last day. Last I checked, I think there's 20 hours left in the campaign.
Hmm.
It's at 57,400
I,
something.
I thought I'd looked yesterday or day before, it was just over 50.
Yeah,
And so, yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
Uh,
So it's
so
it's
there will
been very
definitely be
humbling.
more season two, or there will definitely be
Yes.
a season two.
Oh yes, there's absolutely going to be a season two, and we've already gone above and beyond what we were planning to do since this is happening, and we have extra guests, and it's going to be really great. So
I've I've heard there can be weird pitfalls that people don't necessarily think about in Kickstarter, and it's
yeah.
not exactly a shared skill set necessarily with making your creative project to know how to run this
Hmm.
thing. Um,
No.
was there anything in particular that, I mean, this one's funded and has worked, it's going to work out. I know y'all can make a show, and it's not like When I Wonder is, this book ever going to show up. Uh, but was there anything in particular that you were like, no, 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 don't do a tier like that, or oh my gosh, we got to offer this?
Um, I, I'm trying to think specifically. I mean, I think the biggest thing is trying to figure out what we can offer that's awesome, but also cost effective. So we're not
Hmm.
just funding a Kickstarter, basically. um, I think that was the fine line of like, what are cool things that we could offer that are creative, that would be unique to people that are fans of hanging with
Hmm.
Dr. Z, that aren't going to cost so much money to make and then ship that
Yeah.
it's not even worth it to do it. So I think finding that balance, and then there's one prize we already had to like swap out with something else because we thought it was going to cost one thing, and then the vendor came back and it was like 4 times the amount that they had quoted
Yeah.
us. So we already had to do that. But the backers that backed that so far have been really understanding, and immediately we're like, we're just here to support the project. Whatever we get is awesome. So that was very nice.
It looked like from the comments that it was a pretty good crew of fans. That
Yeah.
I I happen. I mean, I think everybody, when they're finding what they think is funny, whenever that happens for people in junior high, or whenever the first time that you run into Monty Python and two of your friends go, "This is stupid," and you go, "Well, leave the sleepover then." Uh, there's always that moment of finding out like what level of in joke you like to tolerate, and what level of weird do you think is funny or just strange. And honestly, smarmy uh, luau Dr. Z is hilarious to me. Um,
Yeah.
was there a moment when you were growing up when you first kind of realized like that's my brand of humor?
I think I don't know about growing up, but I know well, I guess really where for me where I feel so lucky and I feel like the thing I was meant to do was this. Um, is I think back to when I was in high school and just like goofing around with my best friend, like we'd put on old like Disney movies and do like our own like running commentary and just dumb jokes like that. And now seeing how that same sense of humor jives with Dana, and where like jokes and stuff that I would have between my friends, I now joke that same way with Dana, and it's not only does he get it and laugh, but it ends up in things we're working on and stuff. So it very much feels like I found my crew, which feels a little funny because I'm 33 and most of the people I'm working with are like in their 50s, but it gels very well.
And in terms of that moment of learning structure, of kind of leaning into the craft of I have this spark I need to develop. Um, do you remember the first time that you sat down and looked at a page and went, okay, that's a pretty complex, really funny situation that I just captured?
I still don't know if I've done that.
I
No,
have seen the prom episode. You absolutely have. So,
thank you. Um, I think some of my sketch writing with Femmebot PhD, there's stuff where like, especially when we put it up on its feet, and I'd see it play out, where it's
mhm.
like, oh, maybe I can do this. Like, this fits.
that
um,
actually is working.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah.
That's great. Is there anything that obviously season two folks can go and maybe for another hour might be able
I
to
think
contribute? I'm
I was
sure
gonna say it'll probably be done by
probably
that
be
point,
done,
but
but that's fine. They can just ride on our coattails and watch the season two anyway. Uh,
yeah, what they can do is go subscribe to the Hanging with Dr. Z YouTube channel, and then that way
yes,
they're there for when the season two drops, which we haven't even shot yet. So
so they've
stay
got a
tuned.
minute. Go get subscribed, smash
Yeah.
that bell, and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, Thank you so much for talking to me about all of this today. I really enjoyed your particular episode of on Stand Against Evil, which is
Thank
a thoroughly
you.
funny show,
That really
uh,
means a lot.
and was really interested to hear how Dr. Z came together. Thank you so much.